So we're going to start with a little game. I've not prepped the two people who are going to help me with this game. So Sharon and Gareth, if you guys could come forward and help me with this, that would be awesome. Thank you. Yep. I've gone with two people that won't, well, if you offend people, then they can deal with it. So I have a collection of stickers here, and I need you to go and find people who these stickers apply to, okay? So we have firefighter, drummer, professional, retired, competitive, mother, funny, wise, old, young, tall, short, police officer, and teacher. So let me randomly divide those. You can have those, you can have those. Okay, could you go and apply them to people or the person whom you think this is appropriate to? I mean, the first one you've got might actually stump us immediately, because I don't know that either of our police officers are here. Go. Yes, but I can't have competitive because I've got a different sticker later. So you have to find, I would have had competitive though, so that's fine. Sharon's looking for someone old. Someone old for Sharon? There is a reason for this as well. Please, I'm not just picking on you. Gareth's doing a slightly... Sharon, dare I say you maybe are overthinking it a touch? Oh, police officer we may struggle with this morning, I've realised that. Okay. Police officer's fine, Sharon, you can hold on to that. You're left with old. Wow. You're done? Police officer, that's fine. Not a problem. Thank you, I'll take those from you. No, you're done, you're fine. Gareth's got a couple left. Funny. Gareth, what have you got left? Competitive. I know I could wear it, but I've got another one. Okay, I'll have it, fine, just so we can keep moving with the service. And it means I win, so it's fine. Stick that somewhere, it's not going to annoy me. Thank you, Gareth. Can we just have a quick round of applause for those two? So there is a collection of you now sat here with labels. You may be happy with your labels. You may be less happy with your labels. I tried to give labels that would avoid these two being cut from the Christmas greetings we do in December. So if you do have any problems, Sheila, then please do speak to Pastor Mark about your label and he can do something about it. But labels are funny things, aren't they? They're incredibly informative. And yet they're also incredibly narrow-minded. Incredibly narrow-minded. Mark, would you say you are funny?
Hysterical.
Would you say you are just funny? And Sheila, do you think you are just old? No. Labels aren't necessarily bad, but they are incredibly dangerous when they are all that we assume of the person. So this week, as we were reading about Joshua, one of my favorite Bible characters, I assumed I would take something from Joshua's life, and we'd have a wonderful morning. We've had a dedication, and then we would have Joshua, and everything would be brilliant. But as I read through the readings, I was drawn to a different character. A character who many of us will know about. A character who has a label that does not do justice to the full person that they were. And it was this character that got me thinking how incredibly dangerous labels can be, because when we label someone, we can leave it there. We can just bench that person as funny, short, old, retired, whatever it might be. This got me thinking again about the danger of the labels that we give ourselves and the damage that can do. So I'm going to ask Catherine to come and read for us this morning from Joshua 2. Thank you, Catherine.
Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 to 15. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. "Go look over the land," he said, "especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they've come to spy out the whole land." But the woman who had taken the 2 men and hidden them said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them." But she had taken them up onto the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up onto the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given this land to you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts sank, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men assured her. "If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Amen.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. What's the next one? Perfect. So, we have Rahab the prostitute. Nothing like speaking on prostitution on a dedication morning. Okay. We have our first sticker. This morning's going to be an incredibly difficult message. There's no 2 ways about it, because whether we like it or not, we live by labels. I've realized this the more that I've spent time on this message, and this message has been sat with me for 2 weeks now. The more that I've spent time in it, the more I've realized how incredibly held we are by labels. By the labels that we are given by others, by the labels that we give others, and indeed the labels that we place on ourselves. And so we begin this morning looking at this incredible individual, Rahab, who was a prostitute. I did a quick test on Mark a fortnight ago when I said to him, "Who is Rahab?" To which he responded, "A prostitute," which meant the whole message should hold together for us this morning. By simply labeling someone and walking away, we can feel pretty happy with the way we are living life. Sometimes we give people labels to make ourselves feel better. Think about the situation Rahab finds herself in. Rahab the prostitute. You can imagine the conversations around the city. Stay away from her. Lock up your husbands. A bad egg. She's always going to go that way. If we took that mentality, and many of us do, and I'm guilty of this, please hear that, we label people so that we can steer clear of them. We label people so we can understand how they fit into society and into culture. I don't know if you've heard any of these other names, but we have things like the dropout, the bad egg, the good for nothing, the drug addict, the homeless. The truth is, whether we like it or not, for so many of those labels, and Rahab falls into this, they are the kind of people that we would not naturally choose to mix with. They are often the parts of society that we see as bad or as toxic. Rahab the prostitute stuck as a label. It stuck as a label. But do we dare to believe that that was all there was to this woman? Do we believe that label would define everything about who she was and all she would ever amass to? Because we know, for those of us that have read this week, she was so much more than that. And the danger is, if we label others and we label ourselves, we begin to play down to the label. I wonder if any of you have ever done this. I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but how many of you have ever applied labels to yourselves? It often starts with this line: I'm just not very academic. I'm just not very sporty. I'm just not very good at maths. I'm not good at interacting with people. I'm not very good at being patient. It's amazing how quickly we may apply labels. Gosh, any of you who drove here this morning may well have already done this, where you've just thought, the Sunday drivers are out. The speed at which we apply labels is terrifying. And I want us to get on board this morning with this idea of labels, because I believe there is so much more to each individual that we maybe have labeled, or the labels that we carry. So we need to be on the same page when we understand that these labels should not define us. I want us to take Rahab from this morning's reading. We read this: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy on the whole land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. I wonder just for a minute if maybe, I need to find the right sticker now. There we are. If maybe we could start to label her Rahab the hero. Because she has just saved these spies. She saved their lives. Rahab the hero. How about this? "Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and my mother, my brother and my sister, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death." Well, now, I don't think it would be unfair to add wise to our little list of things that Rahab is. Rahab the wise, she's seen an opportunity. She's seen an opportunity not just to save her own skin, but to save the entire household that she is a part of. Suddenly that first label that we start with, that the Bible gives us as an introduction to her, seems to fall incredibly short, because we have her as a bit of a hero figure now. We have her with wisdom now. And it goes on. "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord, your God, is the God of heaven and on earth below." Well, maybe now we could call her Rahab the observant, because she's paid attention to what God's been doing in other places, and she's taken it on board. In fact, I don't think it would be a push to begin to suggest that Rahab is developing something of a healthy fear of God. All of a sudden, that label that we began with seems to sell this incredible woman short of all that she is. Funny, isn't it? For many of us, the easiest way to dismiss this would be to say, but God's adding these things in to fit with what he's doing. Rubbish. At her core, Rahab would have been wise. Rahab would have been brave. She was clearly a very astute lady. So actually, we need to begin to realize that the label that had been stuck to her originally just sold her short. I don't know if you've ever considered just how short That one label can sell her and in turn all of us. She shows wisdom, understanding of the things that are going on. She's heard what God is doing and she's shown bravery in the face of the king's request to bring out the spies. She shows compassion on the spies. She shows cunning to both deceive the king's men and to make sure her family is saved. Suddenly just one label does not seem to do justice to who this woman is. And yet for many of us, if I were to ask you, who is Rahab? Your answer would have been exactly the same as Pastor Mark's was, exactly the same as mine was for generations of reading this, because we've just assumed this is the label that is applied to this lady. If you went to any church meeting in the valley this morning, I guarantee you the first response you would have about Rahab is she was a prostitute. And that would probably be the answer. Selling her incredibly short. Suddenly we begin to realize that there can be much more to me or Mark than simply pastors. There can be much more to Sheila than just being old. More to whoever blessed them is short. There's more to you than being short. It's incredible, isn't it, when we begin to realize that these labels we've placed on people do not do justice to who that person is. Suddenly we begin to realize that maybe there is more to the drug addict, to the homeless, to the dropout. Suddenly the old and the retired are not simply people that we just put up with, but are an enriching part of our community. I'm not saying that to be blasé, but how often do we find ourselves drifting into that mentality? How often does society drift into that mentality? The labels in which we place on people so often define the way that we see them. So often the label that is given is in keeping with the labels of society. And if we're giving people labels, and if we're living in a world where the labels that society gives to people, then we are missing so much of what God is doing. If we simply play by society's labeling system, then we miss what God is doing, and we miss the opportunity to get unique characters who bring so much to the table involved in our lives. To see the truth of who they are. I want you to think for a moment. Very few of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, would bring Rahab the prostitute back to meet our parents. I can imagine that would be a very different conversation with my parents than it was when I met Laura. But we wouldn't. But how about bringing Rahab the brave to meet our parents? Rahab the spy savior, Rahab the God-fearer. That Rahab we would be happy to bring back, yet same person, different label. The power of labels needs to be understood so that we can move past them. The final thing I want to say on this about the labels that we place on other people is they don't just have to be bad. They don't just have to be bad. Sometimes the best labels can be burdensome. I wonder how often we've heard it said, oh, they're the academic sibling. Well, now they've got a lot to live up to. How often do we hear things like rising star, retired pastor? They are true labels, but yet they can create a very similar problem. I know for myself that I struggle with this connotation of reverend. Of somehow by being a reverend or by being a pastor, I am immune to the realization that I might rock up to church on a Sunday and I do not want to be here. I apologize. But some Sundays life is rough. And yet because of this title, this label that I have the privilege of wearing, there is an assumption that Mark and I are always happy. Everything is always great. In fact, the only time that we aren't praying is when we're talking to you. And even then, subconsciously, we are continuously in prayer. It baffles me how wonderful a title it is, and yet how much pressure it places on me. It almost negates the fact that I am husband and dad and son. And yet I'm all of those things as well, which means that the way you arrive on a Sunday morning may be very similar to the way I've arrived. Good labels can be equally as detrimental. We need to be very, very careful about the way we label others. I just want to watch or show you a very short video a second, just a small snippet of an interview with an NFL quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who talks about criticism, but I think it works equally with this idea of labels. It's amazing how often we fall into the trap of living up to the labels that are spoken over us. And if we are completely honest with ourselves, a huge number of those labels are from people that we would never go to for wisdom and support. And yet we are so easily defined by them. It got me to thinking, why do we care so much about what people think of us? Why? Why are we so held up by how they will label us? A genuine real-life example, you can ask Laura this. We went to see a concert in Cardiff, and we were stood there, and because we're polite people, we talked to the people next to us, and it was lovely, and we had common ground to talk about, right up until they said, "And what do you do?" And instantly, my brain is processing, how are they going to respond when I answer? What are they going to think about me? How are they going to move? Are they going to shuffle away? Are they going to suddenly open up about all of their burdens? I don't know what's going to happen. I suddenly became very, very conscious that I was giving them the pen and the paper to write my label then and there. I've never seen those people since. In fact, as soon as the evening began, I wasn't really aware they were there. But yet in that moment, how they would label me became incredibly all-consuming. We care so much about what people think, about how they will label us. It amazes me how the labels of a relative stranger can eat away at us, often define the way we act in a certain situation, and in turn, how easily we ignore the labels that God has given us. Because that's what this is really about. What this is really about is the fact that we allow the world's volume to be so loud that their labels define us, and they slowly but surely begin to cover the labels which God has given us. Think for a minute how quickly you will believe the lies of a stranger versus the promises of God. How many of us feel unloved? I just want to let that sit for a minute. You don't need to answer, you don't need to respond, you can do the whole poker face thing. But how many of us feel unloved? How many of us feel unlovable? And yet God tells us and showed us through his son Jesus that he loves you. And yet we wear the label unloved far quicker than the label of loved. How many live under the label of mistake? How many of us truly live under that label? When God clearly reminds us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. I wonder how many of us feel useless, redundant, unhelpful. Despite God's promise that he has a plan and a purpose for your life. How many of us wear the label of loner, of outcast, socially awkward, alone? Despite knowing God has promised to be with you always, even to the end of the age, it is terrifying how quickly I will wear man-made labels to deny the truth of what God has spoken over me. And I hasten to add, I cannot be the only person that that's true for. I wonder how many of us love this statement in Philippians 13, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. But so often this is then flipped to I am controlled by the labels others give me. Do we truly believe we can do all things through him who gives us strength, even when the world tells us otherwise? We need to consciously and intentionally turn down the volume of the world and turn up the volume of God's promises in our lives, or we will forever be held by the labels that have been placed on us. We have to choose to listen to God's promises and to cling to them in the same manner that for many of us we have held the labels the world has given us. Because I think if we were to take a stop and genuinely consider what do I hold on to more tightly, for many of us it is the lies over the truth. Whether we like it or not, call it human nature. We cling to the labels we've been given and somehow dismiss God's promises over us. That's before we even consider the labels that we stick on ourselves. If I stood here with all the labels I had ever placed on myself in my life, if I stuck the labels on in the good times, when I'd done well at something, or the times when life had been hard, the times when someone broke up with me, or the time when I crashed my car, if I'd stuck all of those labels, I would be knee-deep in labels by now. Two things happen when we do that. One, we create an incredible messy pile of labels all over us. And second, we do a monumental disservice to God. When we do this, we create a mess of identity. We create a mess of understanding of who we are. And what we are doing is covering the promises that God has spoken over each of us. And we have to be careful to guard against that. Intentionally or unintentionally, when we place a sticker on ourselves that is contrary to the truth that God speaks over us, we are for all intents and purposes calling God a liar. I want that to sit a minute. Intentionally or unintentionally, when we place a sticker on ourselves that is contrary to the truth God speaks over us, we are for all intents and purposes calling God a liar. And then we live in the truth that God is a liar in the way we live our lives. Told you it wasn't going to be a fun message. When I believe a label that has been given to me by the world, or that I've given myself, that is contrary to the promises and the truth of God, I am living a life that tells him I think he's a liar. I have chosen to take a person who walks this earth with me, who had nothing to do with creation. I'm choosing to take their word over the word of God. Maybe I don't want to go as far as saying I'm calling him a liar. Maybe that sits uncomfortably for you, despite being a fairly sound truth. Maybe you'd rather phrase it like this: I choose to live a life that tells God he got that one wrong. God, I love that you say this about me, but just so you're aware, you're wrong. Fount of all knowledge, beginning and end, Alpha and Omega, a few other titles, God, but on this one, trust me, you're wrong. Bob down the road told me, and he is right. But we live like that. How many of us live our lives where we are willing to listen to Bob down? I don't know who Bob is. There's no one being attacked here. But how often do we live our lives by what someone like Bob says to us when God is plastering truth around us constantly? It's a difficult truth to swallow, but every time you label yourself worthless, label yourself an outcast, unlovable, failure, mess up, mistake, or anything else that you choose to stick on, you are denying the truth that God speaks over you, that you are loved. It begins and it ends with that promise that you are loved. Everything works from that point forward. Every label that the world chooses to stick on you is undone by this incredible truth that you are loved. You are loved. It's not just lip service from God, it's so much so that he sent his one and only Son to the cross for each of us individually. As much as Mark and I may love you, we didn't petition God for an all-inclusive package from Moriah Baptist Church attendees. That was done for you, the individual, because he loves you. He loves you. The danger of labeling ourselves, of labeling others, allowing the stickers that others stick to us to hold a place in our lives that is wrong, is they are incredibly narrow-minded. They see so little of the big picture. So I want to close with this as we look back at Rahab the prostitute. Her story is truly incredible. Truly incredible. We have no idea how she got to this point. We have no idea how she happens to be living in the wall of a city, why the spies ended up at her house and not one of the other houses in the city. We don't know. We do not know what it is that brought her to the point where the introduction to her in the Bible and the answer from most people that have spent time in the Word is Rahab the prostitute. But we do know this. Her story did not end there. Her story does not end in Joshua 2. If you join me for a moment in Matthew. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. What about if we decided to call her Rahab the mother instead? It's there. Rahab the wife. We could go as far as Rahab, the great-great-grandmother of King David. Or we could go one step further and call her Rahab, the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Jesus. That early sticker that she is given, that first introduction that we have to her that could define her, could map out her entire life, is such a disservice to who this woman was. This woman who is introduced to us as a prostitute finds herself in Matthew, in Jesus' family tree, as his there's 7 greats in there, grandmother. How about we let those kind of labels stick? How about we be the people that look for what God is doing in someone's life and call it out and support it and champion it? How about for our own lives we begin to believe the labels that God is giving us, not the ones the world gives us? Rahab's early label did not define her. It did not deny what God was doing through her. And her story serves as a crucial reminder to every single one of us. Just because we wear the label of competitive, police officer, teacher, tool, short, old, so on and so on, we need to ask this question. Who is God calling you to be? Who is God calling you to be? What is he saying over your life? And finally, and crucially, what labels do you need to peel off and bin to make space for his truth and his promise in your life?